Hello and welcome. I am Fahd Husain. Let me begin tonight with today's big development. Iran has submitted a fresh peace proposal to the US through Pakistani mediation team. The details of the proposal are not available at this point, but it is a step in the right direction. So a ceasefire is still in place. But if you look closely at the reporting coming in, particularly from the international media, the situation is being described as a stalemate where, in the words of a report in CNN, the very real possibility of resumption of war looms overhead. That line captures the mood quite accurately, since both sides are engaged in talks but are also preparing for the possibility that those talks may not hold. President Donald Trump's position has been expressed quite directly. He has made it clear that any agreement must include a complete halt to Iran's nuclear ambitions. That kind of statement suggests that the negotiations are not only sensitive but also tightly controlled at the highest political level. On the Iranian side, the tone is equally firm, but it is framed in a different way. The country's supreme leader has said that Iran will safeguard its nuclear and missile capabilities and that these are not matters open to external pressure. In another message, he emphasized that foreign powers have no role in the Persian Gulf, adding that such actors belong in the depths of its waters. When you place these statements alongside the American demands, it becomes clear that both sides are drawing clear lines rather than softening them. While this exchange continues, the situation on the ground is moving in parallel and it is having visible consequences. The US is maintaining and tightening its naval blockade, while Iran is using its geographical position to signal that it can control and halt movement through the Strait of Hormuz. The result is that energy flows have been disrupted enough to move markets quite sharply. Oil prices are now staying above the $110 per barrel level, and the movement has been volatile rather than steady. The impact is already being felt beyond the region, with inflation concerns resurfacing and central banks beginning to sound more cautious again. There is also a legal and political layer to this story that is beginning to come into focus. International media is reporting that the 60-day mark under US war powers legislation has now effectively been reached. This is the point at which the administration would normally need congressional approval to continue military operations. Yet, the current argument coming out of Washington is that the ceasefire has paused active hostilities and therefore changes how that deadline is interpreted. This leaves the situation in something of a legal grey area. What makes this moment interesting is how the overall balance of the conflict is being assessed. A recent editorial in the New York Times put it in very direct terms, saying that tactical success has not yielded victory and that the weaker nation is in the stronger negotiating position. That is a striking observation, especially when you consider the scale of the military imbalance at the start of the war. The editorial goes further to suggest that the US has been highly effective in striking targets but has struggled to translate that into a decisive outcome in an environment where low-cost technologies such as drones and missiles continue to create pressure. In practical terms, what that means is that despite significant military action, Iran retains enough leverage to shape the negotiations. After today's news of the new proposal submitted by Iran, diplomatic engagement is active. However, public positions are becoming more rigid rather than more flexible. Economic pressure is increasing, but it has not yet forced a breakthrough. And the military dimension, while still significant, has not settled the issue. That combination tends to produce a very specific kind of phase in conflicts. One where the situation appears stable on the surface, but is actually quite fragile underneath. The absence of large-scale escalation can create a sense of pause. Yet the underlying tension continues to build, and the margin for error becomes smaller over time. So the question tonight is very simple. Will we see the war resume, or will there be a miraculous diplomatic breakthrough. That is where things stand today. To discuss this situation in detail, we are joined now by Mr. Borzou Daragahi. He's a long-time foreign correspondent. He's a veteran of the Financial Times, Los Angeles Times, The Independent, and BuzzFeed News. He was a 2005 Pulitzer Prize finalist for his coverage of Iraq and led the bureau that was named a 2007 Pulitzer finalist for its Iraq coverage. He was also named a 2010 Pulitzer finalist for his coverage of the 2009 election unrest in Iran. He has covered Iran, Afghanistan, Lebanon, and the wider Middle East, and he joins us today from London. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, given your vast experience reporting in this region, I want to start with asking you to give your reaction to this news which has just recently come, where it's come from the Iranian official news agency. And it says that a fresh proposal, the Islamic Republic of Iran delivered the text of its latest negotiating proposal to Pakistan as the mediator in talks with the US on Thursday evening. This was reported by the official IRNA news agency. What should we read into this?
Well, I think it's a positive news in a way. It shows that Iran is still engaged seriously in these negotiations. But to be fair, it's been kind of serious from the very beginning, and it's made its red lines very clear. And those include no discussions about our ballistic missile program, no discussion about our proxy groups, but we can talk a little bit about the nuclear program so long as the United States respects Iran's right to enrich on its own soil. So those red lines have been clear. What the latest ideas from Iran that have been coming out have been about the Strait of Hormuz. And what the Iranians have been saying lately is that why don't we put all those other issues aside and let's just talk about the Strait of Hormuz. This is kind of smart in that it puts Donald Trump in a tough position, in that the starting point of the negotiations is something that happened because of the war that he started. So it kind of creates a whole new balance of power between the two countries.
But we are seeing a lot of belligerence from Donald Trump. He continues to talk tough and he continues to post very provocative things against Iran. And he's also now been briefed about the option of restarting hostilities if that is required. So, in your opinion, what are you reading? Is there a serious danger of the US once again resorting to armed conflict?
Oh, absolutely. I think at this point, the possibility of renewed armed conflict is more likely than less likely. I would put it at around 60%, just because all of that equipment is there. The United States, as you mentioned, under Donald Trump, is full of belligerent language. Eventually, he's going to have to follow through on some of that, or risk being called out by his own base. Those messages, that nasty talk Donald Trump is putting out, is aimed mostly at his own supporters. He's trying to feed them red meat. His support base is dwindling. He's alienated so many different people. He only has a very small base of strident supporters right now, and this is the kind of material they like. Unfortunately, it's really the opposite of the Iranian negotiating style. They're kind of formal and old-fashioned, and they see these threats as threats. And that's really, to the Iranians, one of their main principles is we don't negotiate under pressure.
So then if actually Donald Trump decides to go back to war, how would that be different? So, for example, we can assume that if he starts bombing Iran again, Iran is going to start lobbing missiles back towards the US bases or Gulf countries. There's going to be, of course, renewed fighting on all fronts. And with fresh bombing, what new outcome could actually take place? I mean, the Iranians are not going to open the Strait of Hormuz just because more bombs are falling. So how does another round of fighting help Donald Trump?
I don't know if it helps Donald Trump. It helps him, as I said, feed more red meat to those supporters. Look, Fahd, there's a reason why the war stopped in the first round. When it stopped, it was because the escalation in the conflict was about to go way up. If you recall, viewers recall, Donald Trump was threatening to send Iran back into the Stone Age and destroy all of Iran's energy infrastructure. And Iran, in turn, was saying that if the United States did that, they would destroy the Saudi, UAE, Qatari energy infrastructure, target desalination plants in the Gulf, and target infrastructure, critical infrastructure in Israel. And so it stopped at that point. And because it was about to get really, really, really grim and really dangerous. And now we're at a point where if the war resumes, it's going to get much worse. If you look at the history of all wars, that were stop and start, et cetera, World War I, World War II, it always got worse and worse as it went along.
But this war can't go on for too long. I mean, every analyst, from both sides of the conflict is saying that there is no way that this can continue for, as long as the other major conflicts took place. Not just because, the impact is so huge, both in terms of the damage to regional countries, but also to the economy of the entire globe. And plus on top of that, even papers like the New York Times are now writing in their editorials that the American military is failing to dominate Iran's resistance. So whichever way you look at it, even in terms of the military equipment that the Americans have, which is depleting. So whichever way you look at it, it looks very difficult for the Americans to just make this into another forever war.
Oh, I think that it could very well go on for a long time. Wars tend to reshape planets. They reshape supply lines. They reshape continents. And if you look at the situation right now, it looks like the war is not possible to continue. But when you have a country like Iran, for example, or the US, they can reconfigure factories. They can go to partners. They can go to Russia, China. They can go to Europe. They can go to different people and different countries, different financiers. So, when you're in a state of war like we are now, things are very kinetic. They move very rapidly, and countries will readjust. And you know what? Even the victims of the war, i.e., for example, people in Pakistan and India and Southeast Asia, Latin America, they will have to readjust. They will have to find other ways of getting energy. Maybe it will hasten the adoption of clean energy, battery and solar and so on. So I think that it's really analytically irresponsible to look at the supplies of missiles that Iran has and the supplies of missiles that the US has and say, oh, this war can't go on forever. It indeed can.
The general perception is that between the US and Iran, both are trying to make sure that the other side blinks first. And of course, then the other layer of analysis that we read is that Iran can hold on for X number of months in the current context, their economy can hold on for so long. On the American side, there's so many weeks or so many months before the American economy or the political impact of the war is going to start getting too much. So when we are talking about who has more stamina, is that an important factor right now in trying to figure out where this conflict will ultimately go?
Well, absolutely. It's important. It's crucial, actually, because to Iran, this is an existential battle. The U.S. and Israel immediately launched this war and said that this was about regime change. We're going to topple the clerical regime in Iran. We're going to go after the Revolutionary Guard. We're going to start targeting checkpoints manned by 16-year-old kids in the cities and so on. And so this basically became an existential conflict. They hit energy plants, they hit schools, if viewers recall. And so to the Iranians, the message is this: we have to keep going no matter what. It doesn't matter how much we can't eat. It doesn't matter if our jobs are gone. We have to fight. Whereas for the Americans, this was 100% a war of choice. There was no threat to the United States. There was no even imminent threat to Israel. This was a decision taken on the high of the Venezuela operation, with Netanyahu fulfilling his career-long dream, keeping himself also out of jail in the meantime by maintaining a sense of crisis in Israel. So, the stakes are very different for the two different sides.
But which side has more stamina, you think, right now?
Oh, absolutely, Iran, because they are facing the fight of their lives. The Islamic Republic is going to be destroyed if they don't fight. Iran's, at least in the minds of people in Iran, Iran's national infrastructure, including steel factories, petrochemical plants, places that people have been working on and building for decades, is going to be destroyed if they don't fight back. So, absolutely, Iran, on the issue of stamina and willingness to fight, I think it favors Iran.